Hey, what's up? Dave with Brazos Valley Strength. Today we're going to be talking about forward banded deadlifts, an exercise that I, in my How to Sumo Deadlift video, referred to as the worst thing ever. Now, in today's video, we're going to try to break that down a little bit more. I'm not just going to come at it dismissively. I tried to engage with a lot of people on Instagram this past week and figure out really maybe some gaps in what I was expecting people to be getting out of this deadlift and really what they're looking for. And I don't know that I had a whole lot of surprises, but I think mostly where the issues that I see coming from the forward banded deadlifts, how they're applied, how people are looking to use them in their deadlifts, comes from a pretty fundamental misunderstanding of some of the issues that they're having with their deadlift in the first place. So, as usual with my videos here, so much of what I'm gonna say is going to build off of past videos, and I mean specifically the past like 4-ish videos that I've made, the How to Sumo Deadlift full, complete guide, the variations video, and then just most recently the back training video. All of these are going to factor in here. So if I reference those, I'll put the title cards up and we'll be able to show those. But if you are a first time viewer of this channel and you're coming here basically just because you disagree, please give this a chance. I think even if you disagree with what I'm saying here, you may end up coming up with a better understanding of what you're trying to get out of your forward banded deadlifts if you continue to do them after this, or you may be able to apply some things a little bit differently. So I think that's important. This issue specifically, I think the issue that we're going to be trying to address with the forward banded deadlifts or how we're thinking about them, I did cover pretty extensively in my How to Sumo Deadlift guide. So there's a lot of good stuff in there, and if you want a deeper dive, please watch that video, give it a chance before just giving me a dislike on this video. I'm gonna try to be as fair as I can and try to encapsulate all of my thoughts and the goals that people are trying to get out of this exercise specifically. So I wanna start at the beginning, I guess. We'll start off with the goal of the exercise. And I think it's important to classify it in maybe two different categories or have a spectrum of how we're talking about this. So how we think we can classify it is just based on the band tension that's attached to the barbell. So with this exercise, I think that we have a wide variety of options with what people are trying to get out of it, and many of the messages that I got on Instagram about how they thought that this exercise was helping them, and even loads, it was a pretty wide gap. So that's what I want to talk about. So we're going to scale this from very light tension with the band to the barbell to very heavy tension, and probably at that point very heavy load on the barbell as well. And I think that my feelings on the subject probably scale exactly with the tension to the barbell. So if it's very light, I don't have very strong feelings. But as that tension gets heavier, that's where I really start to feel significantly stronger. So we'll start to scale the way that we're talking about it with it overall. So I think at the very beginning of this, we can talk about a very light band attached to the barbell. This is, I don't know, I would say half of the population that was telling me how they use them was using a light band to feel their lats, and that it was a good tool to teach beginner lifters to keep the bar close. And I think that is the important thing that we want to talk about here. So if we're going to be grading an exercise on its efficacy in our training, I don't know that the bar being, is it a good exercise for beginners, is really relevant. It's not really what we want to talk about here, because there's so many exercises that fit into that category. I mean, potentially any exercise fits into that category. And I think one of the easiest examples I could come up with would be something like box squats. I don't see those almost at all anymore. And even the people that I see doing forward banded deadlifts, I know have been pretty critical of box squats. But I think I could probably make a stronger argument for box squats as having value in, beginner, maybe even going further than that, in their programming that I could forward banded deadlifts, right? Somebody who's a beginner, again, we're talking about beginners here, struggling to hit depth, struggling to have their balance on top of their feet, struggling with confidence at the bottom, getting them to hinge and go all the way down, and just generally feeling a full range of motion squat. I think a box squat gives them very good feedback. I don't use them at all in people's training that I coach now, but that doesn't mean it's a bad exercise for beginners. Same thing with the forward banded deadlift. Sure, if it gets them to bring attention to detail to their movement, great, fantastic. But that's not really what we're talking about. My channel is meant at finding ways to improve intermediate and up. I think beginners probably get a lot of value from the stuff that I'm talking about here, but lots of stuff works for beginners. Just getting in the gym and moving is probably a very, very good starting point. So we need to frame this around the idea of, is it going to help intermediate level lifters, advanced lifters, whatever, right? If you can deadlift twice your body weight. I'm making up numbers. That's not an exact number there. But if you're a good deadlifter, relatively, I start to really think that this exercise is really going to create a lot more problems than it solves. So that's the question that we need to answer by the end of the video, is not does the exercise have value, but does the negative, the negative outcomes of the exercise, do those outweigh the positives? Because I think with any exercise that many, many people like, we'll make something up, paused squats. Pause squats are one that people do all the time, right? But there's negative outcomes from pause squats. It messes with our tempo. Sometimes the timing is a little bit different. Those are negative outcomes that people after doing, if we only did pause squats for like 3 months, may feel a little bit awkward going back to competition squats. But that those negative outcomes may be very easy to overcome with the pause squat. And I don't think people really worry about it so much. But with the banded deadlifts, I think that the negative outcomes might be significantly higher, especially as the band tension increases. So what we need to do now is start with the lightest band tension and build band tension from there and talk about the goals, the perceived benefits, and just how it's being utilized. So with a very light band on the barbell, the goal that people have with it is to keep the bar close to them or feel that they're engaging their lats. And that was just such a common term that came up when people were messaging me, is that they really wanted to feel their lats. And that I think is where my main hesitation comes in, because we have to ask, where is the issue in the first place? Do we need to feel the lats at all when we're deadlifting? And I'm not saying, do we need to use the lats? Are the lats going to be utilized when we're deadlifting? Sure, of course they are. But do we need to be hyper aware of them? And is the bar moving away from our bodies, is that going to be something that's caused directly by somebody not feeling their lats? So I think, trying not to be, sarcastic here, the bar is not trying to get away from you. That point needs to be absolutely clear, that the bar is not trying to escape you. There's no force acting on the barbell that is pushing it away from you, except if you're doing that, except if you're setting it up in a position that is either too close to you. If the bar is way too close to you and you're pushing your center of mass backwards, we're gonna rock forward. And the opposite is true too. If you push everything forward, the bar feels like it's getting away from you just because your balance is in front of you. So the bar, there's no force on the barbell that is trying to pull it away from you. So I think the concept of the bar is getting away from me is silly to me. We have to be able to look at that differently and to ask what is happening there in the first place. And so this is where I would say to please watch my How to Sumo Deadlift video. And so much The whole video is talking about balance, and it's talking about this issue specifically and how we can set ourselves in a way to be able to leverage directly above the bar so that the bar isn't getting away. But for the purposes of this video, I think we can demonstrate this fairly easily. So the main reason, maybe there's a few reasons, but the main reasons why the barbell feels like it's getting away from people in the front are, generally speaking, that they're either, and I guess I'm going to use sumo deadlift as my frame point here, but everything that I say is going to be true with conventional as well. But we'll use sumo in my demonstrations. So the two issues would be that people are either rotating too far, right? And we could say rotating too far with their upper body or their lower body. If you rotate too far with your upper body to where your balance is behind the bar, then your center of mass is not going to be on top of the barbell, which your base of support, I guess, is not going to be on top of the barbell, and you're going to get pulled on top of it every time, right? It's going to happen. So we're going to feel like we're getting pulled forward. And I think a lot of times people feel that and they think, wow, I really need to work harder to stay back. But no, the issue in the first place is that you're trying to be back. And so doing anything that has you pull closer is you're misunderstanding the point overall. The other side of it would be that if you are rotating too far with your lower body and you're kicking the bar forward, then when you stand up, the bar is just in front of you. And so you feel like, oh, my back, right? The bar's out in front and all of a sudden my back feels like it's rounding. Because it is, but you did that. You pushed the bar off of your feet. You pushed it out in front of you. And so the solutions there still go back to everything I said in the How to Sumo video, is that we have to leverage on top of the bar, above the bar. The rotation has to come from my upper body in a way that keeps me stacked on top of the barbell. And those other issues, things, it drifting out in front or you getting pulled on top of the barbell are just stemmed from not having good leverage in the first place. So I think that right here is where the argument might be made against me, that by working harder with your lats, by setting up properly, we're gonna assume at this point that somebody is set up properly and that they need to fight more with their lats to not get pulled forward, right? Or like their upper back is rounding and they're just not able to maintain that position. Okay, well, sure. Yeah, that kind of goes back to the video that I just made about back strength and that we can use, regular kind of bodybuilding exercises to build hypertrophy and long-term strength in the upper back. But we can also use other exercises like Romanian deadlifts and stiff leg deadlifts to help train that more protracted position and get the upper back stronger and able to stabilize the position that needs to be in. But oftentimes, I think the people that are using forward banded deadlifts are cueing very much a tight back. And that's where many of these issues come from in the first place, is that if you're trying too hard to, if you're trying at all really, to retract your shoulders and keep stuff pinched, and a lot of times cues with the lats pull people's arms closer, that ends up creating a situation to where you're always going to get pulled to that more lengthened position, especially with heavy loads. So if you are putting yourself in that position at all, if you are very much cueing that you need a tighter back and more rigid back because you're getting pulled forward, the whole reason may be that you're doing that in the first place. So being able to get better at lengthening your arms and leveraging that significantly more efficient position, being further away from the bar and creating leverage there, and engaging your lats by fighting for extension and fighting for your upper body to rotate up and through. We are engaging the lats. We are fighting for your upper back musculature to work. I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying that we need to fight for those positions that are actually relevant to the demands of the exercise. The bar is not trying to get away from you. You just feel that because you're set up off balance in the first place. So I think if the cues that you're using are trying to push you in a direction that you need to pull the bar closer and, engage your upper back more and kind of those concepts overall. I just think that you have a fundamental misunderstanding of why it's happening at all. So going back to the tension of the bands, one of, I think, the more relevant, and maybe, more applicable ways that we could use this would be just with warm-ups, right? That having a very light band attached to the barbell, slightly pulling forward, may give people a little bit of feedback, just about feeling the bar being close, feeling that you're being active with really light loads and you may not need to be. But, I don't know that those things have more value than practicing some of the other solutions to the deadlift with like the long lengthened arms. I most of the time encourage people when they're with their lighter warm-ups to very much so practice a looser setup in order to optimize positioning rather than back tension. And again, I outlined so much of this in my How to Sumo video, even kind of comparing beltless training, beltless deadlifts to belted deadlifts, competition deadlifts, and why many times people feel better or, at least similarly without a belt. And it all comes down to positioning and how they're being active and drawing attention to detail. And I mean, kind of the same things, but in a way that I think is more relevant, right? And makes more sense because again, the bar is really not trying to escape. But as the band tension increases, so if I only have, 20 pounds or whatever, pulling on the barbell, pulling it in front of me, very quickly, that load is going to be offset by the mass of the barbell and me doing the deadlift. And so if that 20 pounds stays the same as I'm getting up to 600, 700 pounds, we may not feel it at all, but then if we're not feeling it at all, if it becomes not relevant, then, why is it there in the first place? So what I have seen is that people do scale. They scale how much weight, how much tension is on the bands, and actively having people like pulling hard on the bands to try to get the bar to escape away from them. And this is where it becomes totally absurd to me. And because we're actively shifting the demands of balance away from something that would be productive. If we're pulling super hard to get the bar to pull away from them, the only way that somebody is going to be able to maintain that position is to actively lean against it. I actually had a few people, maybe challenge me on that on Instagram in my direct messages, and they basically said, no, it just comes down to lat tension. But I mean, try it. Do a lat pullover and put more weight on as you go. Start with very lightweight. You can stand kind of wherever you want and do your lat pullover. And then increase the load. You're gonna have to start shifting against that weight to be able to engage your lats. And so if you're trying to cue lats, you're also very much like affecting your balance that we think is really negative. And that's where I ask the question, do you think that forward banded deadlifts has value in the deadlift? Okay, yes. If you answered yes, do you think that forward banded squats has value in the squats? And the gap was a lot wider. So again, some of this is just my audience. I think my audience is, they tend to not do these kind of things. But my audience gave it a vote of about 65% people said no, that forward banded deadlifts would not work. But that's still 35% of people said yes. But in the next vote, it was about 81% of people who said no, forward banded squats would not work, and only 19-20% of people that said they would. And that was an interesting thought to me. And most people, the reason that they said that forward banded squats would not work always came down to balance, that it was going to affect their balance too negatively, that pulling them forward on the squat was going to be a lot worse than pulling them forward on the deadlift. And that's where I need people to start thinking critically, that if one exercise, if forward banded deadlifts and the balance requirements are not a negative thing on the deadlift, then why wouldn't they not help on the squat as well? And I guess that's my assertion here, is that the issues that we see, like somebody falling, their back rounding on the squat, falling over, it doesn't come down to, them needing to lean back against it. Some people said it did, but again, fundamental errors. That people clearly saw issues with balance there. And that they thought, okay, yeah, it's not going to be productive. But that's exactly what I would say is the main issue here. So if you're actively leaning back against the deadlift, whether there's a band or not, in order to get your center of mass back on top of the deadlift, your back has to round. You have to end up stacked on top of the barbell. It's just not going to work. So that, I think, is something that people need to consider a little bit, more strongly, kind of think about how it's going to affect your balance. And if your answer to this is that the forward band is only applicable at light loads and for beginners, then the answer is no, it's not applicable, right? And if you do still think that forward bands with heavy loads at light loads is something that is productive, then I guess I would challenge you to look a little bit more closely at what is happening with your deadlift. So what are the solutions? What can we do? I think I would look at the examples that I mentioned earlier about kicking the bar forward, rotating too far, either with your legs or with your upper body, and how those things are affecting your balance. And I think that if you practice more of the other exercises, like in my last video, the stiff leg deadlifts, the Romanian deadlifts, and work to feel your balance on top of the barbell, especially at those lower ranges of motion, with your upper back fighting against the load while hanging long, your arms protracted. And if you can apply those things and keep your mass on top of the barbell when you're doing deadlifts, sumo deadlifts, whatever, I think you'll find the solution is significantly easier than some sort of, magic trick right here to get you to engage your lats more. So I guess at the end of the day here, I need to answer the question, are forward banded deadlifts the worst thing ever? Yeah. They don't make sense in any way. I don't think that they're practical. So anyway, hopefully that did help. If you're a first-time viewer and you're here just to disagree with me, please leave me a comment. I would love to have a discussion about this, especially after potentially reviewing some of my other videos and looking at the concepts of deadlifting overall. I think that would be productive. I'm going to try to engage as much as I can in the comments and have discussions here, but trying to avoid arguments as much as possible as well. So if you did like the video, give me a thumbs up. If you're a first time viewer, maybe check out some of those other videos. Subscribe to the channel. We'll see you next time.